if you have any standards as a man, you will be completely chastised and ridiculed for it. People will insult you, saying that you don't deserve that. They will say it all. Like, if you don't want a woman to be overweight, for example, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask. But it probably excludes, what, like 40, 50%, maybe more, depending on your definition of overweight, of women right off the bat. So it is a pretty big filter to put on, and that's only one. However, it's perfectly reasonable. But women have all of these very specific requirements for men. Oh, he has to be making 6 figures, has to be lean, muscular, etc., etc. You guys know the rest. And they get praised for it by all of their other girlfriends. Yes, bare minimum, all that type of stuff. Whereas if a guy even has one, women will all chastise him for it. But then even his guy friends might be like, well, you know, it might be better to get some experience, you know. Hey man, you don't need to have super high standards. Like, come on now. You know? I mean, really, in many cases, women stick together and form almost like a cartel where they have power. And men are individuals and seek to undercut each other to have personal success, but at the expense of the group as a whole. So, if you're a man with standards, you will be insulted, right? But if you're a man who has standards and who cannot meet those standards, for example, if you want a girl to be white, to be within a reasonable weight range, to be within a reasonable age range, to be pretty, etc., and you can't get that, people will insult you endlessly for that. They will basically try to force you to settle. But really, why should you settle? They're trying to force you to do something that you don't want to do. And it shouldn't affect them, but yet they still want you to do it. Why? Well, it's a couple things. One is that if you're not actually going for women, so if you're one of those men going their own way because you can't get the woman you want, then it removes a lot of women's power because now you're not going after them. They get upset by that. Two is that societally, if you're not forming a relationship and then eventually a family and children, then you won't be producing children to perpetuate the society, you know, kind of giving back what you got, essentially, that your parents had to give birth to you, so you should have children yourself. However, women go their own way all the time. They choose to not have children or anything, yet they don't get insulted endlessly for it. And of course, that's partially because every time a woman decides to not have kids, that's a pure choice. Whereas a man, it might be because he actually cannot get a woman. But even so, it doesn't really matter because the baseline thing is like, hey, you're not having kids, you're not being helpful to society, so we're gonna blame you for it. And of course, the men get all the blame for that. And the other thing is that if you're a man and you don't have a family, or you don't have a wife or anything like that, you're not gonna work as hard because you don't really care. There's nothing to really gain. Most men only want to work so that they can chill and play video games and things like that. Most men are not materialistic. Women are the materialistic ones, generally. So you're not going to work as hard. Well, which is also somewhat bad for society. So you kind of have people collectively that want you to do something that goes against your own interests. But not only that, it's a bit of a selfless thing to do. So I think that if you were settling for a girl who you weren't actually attracted to, or at least weren't as attracted to as you would want to be, like hypothetically, let's say you can get a decent girl who was mid, right? Now most guys, because they're very lonely, would do it, like instantly. However, if you're a bit of a guy like me who has pretty high standards, you probably won't. Maybe you've had girls interested in you in the past, but you weren't that interested because they didn't meet like a certain bar that you've set. Now, what you're doing is basically being like, hey, I think it's not right to be with somebody if I don't truly like them, so I'm gonna let them go and be with other people. that's a noble thing in my mind. However, people call you selfish, call you an incel, etc. And being an incel is not an insult, okay? It's only an insult in our society because we're so gynocentric. But in reality, that shouldn't be an insult. It should be simply a label. And also, most guys who are called incels are not actually incels. It's a ridiculous term. But self-labeling as an incel is kind of funny, so I still like the word. Same thing with chud. It's still pretty funny to call yourself a chud, I think. But if you are insulting other people seriously by calling them a chud or an incel, that's ridiculous. But again, if you choose to not be with somebody, even if you would find them partially attractive, so even an average woman is attractive to every guy, pretty much. You know, you would get some pleasure out of it. But maybe the overall thing would be an unhappy situation for you. For example, maybe she might want to watch a show, she might want to do this, or whatever. You wouldn't like the experience, even if you would get your moments of pleasure, because she's average attractiveness. And guys are attracted to average women, even though women are not attracted to average guys. Even then, that would be being kind of selfish in a way, because you only care about those specific things. Now, you are giving stuff to her, so it's not entirely selfish. But I think, I think it's perfectly reasonable to set a bar, set a standard that you want to get. And if you can't obtain this standard, then to be single. What is bad about that? It's a personal choice, yet everybody will try to bring you down and insult you for that choice. Your family as well. Because, of course, they want you to have children. They want you to perpetuate the family line and everything. And that's reasonable. Again, everybody has their incentives for what they believe. But don't let other people pressure you into doing something that you don't want to do. I mean, imagine what is the worst possible outcome that you get with some low-tier Becky. You have kids with her. You don't really like her. She gets a divorce from you. And then ultimately you end up even more depressed. You end up an alcoholic, everything like that. If you're fine living your kind of hermit lifestyle, then that's better. Even if you would prefer, as we all would, if we were with some sort of Stacy Light or something like that, to be with her, to have a fun time, to go on dates, to have fun, to have kids one day maybe. If you can't do it, then don't, Like, why would you make kids with a woman who's not attractive, or at least not very attractive, and settle? Because those kids are going to have a bad life too. You'd want to have kids with a woman who is beautiful or has a high traits, like maybe she's high in openness, low in neuroticism, intelligent, etc. Like, you want good traits. If you're going for whatever you can get, and whatever you can get is not good, if you're doing that merely to perpetuate your bloodline, that is selfish. That's like the definition of selfish right there. It's like the same thing as people who go around impregnating a bunch of women and not being there for the kids. That's selfish because you are spreading your genes, but you're not making good people in the world, because those kids are not going to have a good life. They're going to have a rough upbringing. And that's kind of what you're doing, even if you're there for them. If you settle, So really, it's a selfish thing to do. And I admire the guys who are the stone cold true selves, right? So you're monks, people who go away and they don't deal with women at all, right? What I think is bad is these guys that are desperate and will settle for anything. Those guys on Tinder, on any dating apps, that if you make a dating profile with an unattractive woman, very unattractive, very overweight, let's say she's like 300 pounds or something, you can make that profile and guys will still flock to her. Like, hey mama, what's up? It's pathetic. It's completely pathetic. And we'll have hundreds and hundreds of guys on the first day be swiping. That's how desperate these guys are. And, they're a lot of the cause of hoflation. So don't be those guys. Now maybe this is all coming from me because I'm trying to eliminate my competition. That could be part of it, intersexual competition and stuff. So don't trust everything I say. But still, I think there is something to be said for, your dignity in general, that if you're stooping that low, that's pretty pathetic, So it's better for the dating market as a whole, and it will be better for your soul if you have some integrity, have some standards, and then maybe women will have to start changing some of their behaviors to conform to men's standards, as opposed to what we've had for the past couple of years is men completely changing themselves to conform to women's standards. So be part of the solution, not part of the problem. That's my campaign right there. So in conclusion, you should have standards or not, whatever, it's up to you. But don't let people bring you down for having standards. It's perfectly reasonable. And even if you can't attain them, that doesn't mean that you should lower your standards. Only do that if you want. Don't lower them into hell simply because you're lonely, okay? There's better ways to deal with it. Try to make some friends. If you can't make some friends, cope some other way. But that's about it. See ya.